Jaron Boots Ennis gets the unanimous decision to defend his IBF welterweight belt versus Karen Chukhadzhian. Now, I'm going to pronounce Chukhadzhian's last name that way. I believe he is of Armenian descent, and Armenian surnames end in either IAN or YAN, but you pronounce the two syllables for the two vowels, as in Kardashian. We don't say Kardashian. However, the broadcasters kept calling him Chukhadzhian or something like that. I think that's an error. I think Karen is too stoic and polite to bother correcting these American broadcasters. But in any case, I will refer to him as Karen just to keep it simple. Now, I think the takeaway from this fight is that even though Boots won, he kind of lost in terms of reputation or clout, or in terms of being able to call out other big fighters like Terrence Crawford or even Virgil Ortiz, whom Eddie Hearn was calling for in the post-fight conference. Even though Ennis got the 12-round decision, he did not look good or great. And even though Karen lost the 12-round decision, he actually, I think, performed above expectations. Now, the scores were perhaps a little bit wide. I believe one judge gave Ennis 11 rounds, another judge gave him 9, and another judge gave him 8, something to that effect. Now, the problem is some of those rounds were indeed quite close and somewhat difficult to call. But, you know, as the B-side, as the opponent coming in, as the challenger, Karen had to know that if it came down to a decision, he was likely not going to get the benefit of a close call in terms of round by round scoring. Now, the other significant point in terms of the scorecards is that Karen did take a knee in the 5th round when he was kind of caught in the corner with a barrage by Ennis, and so that's automatically a 10-8 round in Ennis's favor. And then the referee deducted a point from Karen in the 10th round, I believe, for holding, so that was another 10-8 round in Ennis's favor. Nevertheless, let's take a look at what Karen did well throughout this fight. Well, first off, he started pretty much every exchange with the jab, and he used a good stabbing jab, either to the head or to the body. He also used that feint jab effectively. And as soon as Ennis would respond, Karen would take a little step back, very small step back, to get himself out of range and then come right back into range. And I feel that overall, Karen had better control over distance than Ennis did. I'll come back to that whole notion of distance and why Karen was deducted the point for holding in a little bit. The other thing that Karen did absolutely beautifully was have live feet and continually create angles, either by circling clockwise or counterclockwise, or just one and then the other, to basically shift the angles on Ennis. And that was giving Ennis a fair amount of trouble in the first half of the fight. Now, Karen did land some good punches, especially on the inside in closer quarters, like nice short left hooks, nice overhand rights. But I felt that the area where Karen was a little bit lacking was on the inside, because again, both men wound up doing an awful lot of clenching, and the referee had to work to earn his money that last night. Now, it's not enough just to say get an underhook or an overhook and then try to hit with your free hand, because that's just, given the angle of your two torsos facing each other, the punches are not going to be that effective. So it behooves somebody at a world-class level in boxing to understand how to also grapple on the inside and use your body weight, your center of gravity, to shift angles, create very small angles simply by moving your feet. As little as 1 inch, you can create a different angle. Turn your hips 2 degrees and you can create a different angle. And you have to use that in order to create just enough space to get off a punch. But that said, is really hard not to enjoy the performance that Karen gave us. particularly because of his terrific footwork and we most people will call it lateral movement, but he's not just going in a side to side line. He's circling around and pivoting and constantly creating a new angle. It was clear to me that Chukhadzhian put in the work in his training camp. It takes excellent conditioning to remain, with that bounce in your footwork throughout an entire 12 rounds, and to be able to maintain that constant movement for the entire 12 rounds. Now, is there anything Karen could have done to secure the W? Well, in this case, I mean, if it was going to go to decision, there's no way they were going to give him a decision. He would literally have had to TKO'd or KO'd Ennis in order to get a win in this case. So, given the fact that he took a knee and then was deducted a point, very tough for him to come back and get that TKO or KO against Ennis. Now, Karen appeared absolutely devastated, as expected, in the few post-fight interviews I saw of him. Now, these were conducted by, sort of social media boxing journalists. For whatever reason, I didn't see Karen at the official post-fight press conference, which is a little disappointing because this was a world title fight. So I don't know why that didn't happen, or someone tell me if I just missed it. But in any case, I was impressed with the fact that Karen was very professional. You could tell he was incredibly disappointed, but he remained professional. There was no sour grapes. One reporter even tried to ask him about, if Boots Ennis was quote-unquote spraying him with water, meaning, I don't know what he meant by that. If he meant Boots Ennis was sort of spitting at him while they were fighting, not sure. But Chukhadzhian just, waved that off and didn't give that any credence. He didn't complain about anything, he didn't complain about the ref, etc. So, I give him credit for conducting himself in such a professional manner after such a disheartening loss. One other aspect of Karen's game that I thought was really quite masterful was his head movement and defense. He made some really tight little slips, which not easy to do, and he also made very tight weaving motions under punches to then circle out and pivot and remain within punching distance but create a new angle, and I thought that was absolutely superb on his part. Okay, so let's take a look at Boots Ennis. So, to his credit, when Giron did throw his nice stabbing jabs, he was very effective to the head and to the body. But, unfortunately, for whatever reason, I guess reasons known only to himself, Giron chose to use more of a sort of back fist lazy jab to open things up. I'm not sure why he was throwing that, just as a sort of stay busy move or what have you. But that type of jab is thrown with the elbow out, and it's kind of back fisted, and it's not an effective punch, really. It's just sort of occupying space, which is better than doing nothing, but it doesn't necessarily help you set up a combination if it's not a punch that your opponent fears. The opponent has to be worried about your jab in order for you to get enough of a reaction to build the rest of your combination. So to his credit, when Giron did start throwing combinations, he was really effective. Now, he really loves that tight right uppercut, right or left uppercut on the inside. He did land some decent body shots. Some of them looked like they might have been straying a little bit low, but nevertheless, I did like his body work and his combinations. Where he didn't look as good was just the fact that these combinations were too few and far between. One other aspect of what Ennis didn't do well was he was just throwing too many single punches, whether it was that single lazy jab or winding up overshooting. If he's in orthodox position, overshooting that right hand, or if he's in southpaw position, overshooting his left hand, and then being sort of out of position to follow up with an effective hook. Now, it's actually those moments, I think, where a lot of the clinching started, was when Ennis overshot with either his straight right from righty stance or his straight left from lefty stance. He overshot, Chukhadzhian was underneath him, and so they just naturally fall into a clench. My point here being that I don't know that it was 100% Chukhadzhian's fault, so to speak, for all the clenching that went on. I'm not able to find complete footage of the entire 12-round fight to determine whether or not Chukhadzhian actually deserved to be deducted the point for clinching, but in either case, that wasn't going to make a difference in the outcome of the fight. But here's the main issue I have with Ennis in this fight, is he looks somewhat underprepared. Now, I don't know if that was that he didn't do enough hard sparring, because if that's the case, you want to get in those awkward clenching positions in sparring so that you know how to deal with it. I actually wound up doing a live last night, and I pointed out that Vasily Lomachenko's father, you can find footage of him teaching boxers how to grapple, how to do what we call in like wrestling the pummeling, to get underhooks or from overhooks, and then turn your opponent right there on the spot. And Vasily's, of course, very, very adept at that. But here's my point: if you're a world-class boxer, you got to know how to grapple on the inside. Whether that means how to use your head to block your opponent or nullify your opponent's movement, how to grab his or her bicep to nullify a punch, how to then manipulate them using their elbow, by grabbing their elbow or their tricep and spin them around. These are all aspects of the fight game. And if you look at boxing in black and white, you study very old school fighters like Willie Pep. They knew how to do this. Look at Roberto Duran fighting on the inside. He knows how to do all this grappling. So although Ennis would land those nice tight uppercuts, he just doesn't seem to know how to manipulate his opponent when they get in that clinch, when they get really in tight. And what Ennis would do would just kind of like relax, stick both arms out. It looked like he was either talking to his corner, I don't know if he was saying something to the ref, but it's kind of like mentally losing focus in that moment, and either just complaining about the clinching. But that's not where your mindset should be. The mindset should be on, how do I maneuver this guy, how do I hit him? Now, there were two aspects that I found a little bit confusing in terms of Duran's corner. One was the fact that he chooses to stand up between rounds. Some fighters will argue, well, hey, you never sit down on a stool when you spar in the gym, so why should you bother sitting on a stool when you fight? Well, there's a simple answer to that. Your heart rate is way up when you fight compared to when you're sparring. Sure, your heart rate goes up when you're sparring, but I know from collecting my own data that it's simply because of the adrenaline rush. You will be in heart rate zone 5. You will be at your maximum heart rate for the whole fight. Now, what does that imply in terms of sitting down or standing up? Well, let me ask you this. Any of you guys scuba dive or even just dive to the bottom of a swimming pool? So if so, you know that the fluid pressure depends on the height, right? Or the depth of the water. The deeper you go in the water, the more pressure you're subjected to. Okay, so the same concept works in terms of the fluid pressure in the blood vessels in your body. Your heart is a muscle, right? It has to circulate that blood. It has to get the blood going from your feet all the way back to your heart, from your heart to the lungs to get re-oxygenated, from the lungs back to the heart, and then from the heart back out to your entire body. Now, if we decrease the difference in height between your heart and your feet, when you're sitting down on the stool, it's a little bit less work for your heart to have to deal with, right? At least for 60 seconds. So every little bit counts, right? Because as soon as you stand up off that stool, it's right back to the high output of the fight. Now, the second perplexing thing was apparently in the the second half of the fight, Duran's corner was calling for him to, quote unquote, just get him out of there, and it was like, what do you mean? He's really not, quote unquote, ready to go. You could have argued after the 5th round, when Karen took a knee, that perhaps he was ready to go, but in the second half of the fight, it was apparent that Chukhadzhian came in great conditioning. So I don't know that was a wise set of directions. I mean, I think it would have been better to tell him to get on his combinations, and then, as they say, if the knockout comes, the knockout comes. Because when Ennis put his punches together, he looked terrific, of course, but again, it was just not enough of that. So the reason, perhaps not enough hard sparring, perhaps just not enough preparation in camp, or thirdly, in the post-fight, and it's just said, hey, I wasn't listening, I didn't sit down on my punches, I didn't cut him off. And it's like, well, if you know all of that now, what's up with that? Like, if you know you didn't listen, why weren't you listening? That doesn't really, I don't know, it's hard to explain. But is that a lack of mental focus? Now, the mental aspect of the fight game also has to be practiced. That's done, again, during sparring. You get used to hearing your corner's voice telling you what to do in live time, under duress, when someone's trying to take your head off or punch your body out. You've got to program your mind to respond, your mind and your body to respond in live time. So my question is, did Duran not get that type of mental preparation? Now, one other possibility is that this was part of Boots Promotions, right? Apparently, Duran has a couple of fighters who fought on the undercard. So then the question becomes, well, was that a distraction for him? Was he caught up a little bit more with the whole promotional side of the fight game, and did that detract from his ability to focus on his actual fight? But bottom line, I mean, Eddie Hearn post-fight is saying that they want to fight Virgil Ortiz at 154. They're smart not to even mention Terrence Bud Crawford, because that's just, a performance like that from Ennis does not justify him calling out Bud Crawford at 154. Just no way. And even Virgil Ortiz, I don't know that Ennis earned the right to call him out either. But what do you guys think? How did you evaluate Duran's performance? How did you evaluate Karin's performance? Who would you like to see either fighter fight next? Please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to leave a thumbs up. If you're generous and you're in the mood, feel free to scroll over and leave a super thanks, or you can always head over to buymeacoffee.com/Hamaguchi Fight and purchase a coffee. Finally, if you enjoyed these types of boxing conversations and MMA conversations, please consider joining our membership side. Just click the join button above. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you the next time.